But one also sees this separation in the language of foreign relations. International means everything but us. It's everything that's over there. Somehow we're just not a part of international. When, after World War II, the government and the Ford Foundation provided funds for the establishment of area studies programs in centers for international studies, it never occurred to anyone that American studies, just then being institutionalized in universities, might be categorically similar and housed in the same building. There was no sense that any of these areas, including the U.S., either affected the others or is affected by them. In the 1990s, the Ford Foundation recognized this in its program called Crossing Borders, which provided funds for a more interactive approach to area studies and included American history among those area studies when they gave out the grants. There's another problem. Our American history scholarship and teaching are both so insular that it is hard for foreign scholars to use it, to convey it to students in Europe, Latin America, or Asia. As a French historian recently wrote, American history does not travel. The we-ness of American history is exceptionally strong, even by French standards. Today, things are changing. At the annual meeting of the American Historical Association this past January, by my rough count, about 75% of the sessions had in their title either world or transnational or global. The College Board is trying to change the AP US history curriculum and exams to incorporate a global perspective. Job postings in the American Historical Association listings have begun to look like our Europe and everywhere else. At a time when few jobs are being advertised at all, last year's slim postings included several seeking someone whose work addressed something they called America in the world, by which they did not mean American foreign policy, which is a conventional field. They meant some kind of transnational approach to American history. Why is this happening? Here I'm kind of an eyewitness, somewhat present at the creation of some of this within at least the American field, with the support of Linda Kerber from the University of Iowa when she was president of the OAH. I was given the task, I was on the executive board then, to find the funds and organize a series of conferences exploring this question with responsibility to make a report to the profession. The result was 4 conferences. They were held at Florence to emphasize of our effort. It was also nice to be meeting for 4 straight summers in Florence. Altogether, 90 historians participated. 40% of them were foreign. They represented every continent. We produced a report, the La Pietra Report, that's the name of the villa, in 2000, and a book entitled Rethinking American History in a Global Age. And both were urging transnational and global approaches to U.S. history. From what I've already said, it seems that this effort had an impact. One of the questions is why it's having an impact. I think contemporary preoccupations of the 1990s helped. The buzzwords of the 1990s were multiculturalism and globalization. For a historian, besides saying that these developments were not new, one of the things we regularly do to annoy social scientists, the public discussion suggested a major theoretical issue about history. With that prompt, one might imagine a national experience, and thus a national history, such as that of the modern United States, as the product of some kind of interweaving of histories smaller than the nation, such as multiple cultures, whether ethnic or regional, and histories larger than the nation, such as globalization. A national history is a locally constituted combination of local and larger histories, some of which are global in extent, as in the case of capitalism or global warming or global migration systems. I mean, it's often the case that Americans think that every Italian who left Italy came to New York. But in fact, as many in the 1890s went to Germany and France. Of course, they deny that themselves. And more went to Argentina, and those who went to Argentina, or at least Buenos Aires, is a study comparing Buenos Aires and New York. The upward mobility of those in Buenos Aires is much greater than those in New York City. So this sort of complicates our usual story to just take a simple example. Anyway, I want to say that every local history, and by that I mean a national history in this instance, is part of global history. But it plays out differently in each local history because of local cultural values and political interests. To take a rather large example, one can say that the 20th century has been about competing modernities. And there were basically three strategies: liberal capitalism, communism, and fascism. By the end of the century, only liberal capitalism was still standing. What relations did the competitors imply, and what explains the different outcomes? I didn't know this when I started moving in the direction I've moved, but the 1990s were not the first time historians started exploring these questions. I discovered that the finest historians of the 1890s had the same idea. Henry Adams, perhaps our greatest historian, W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Jackson Turner, they're all among the best historians who ever wrote American history, all had this understanding. Turner, who we associate exclusively with his great essay of 1893 on the significance of the frontier in American history, was in fact a profound historical thinker. His biographer observed that most historians have no original ideas, but Turner had two. I would suggest that he had three. And it was expressed in an essay that he wrote 2 years before the famous Frontier essay, with a much larger title. Instead of the significance of the frontier in American history, it was more broadly the significance of history, period. And there he observed, not only is it true that no country can be understood without taking account of all the past, it is also true that we cannot select a stretch of land and say that we will limit our study to this land, for local history can only be understood in the light of the history of the world. Each nation acts upon each. Ideas, commodities even, refuse the bounds of nation. All are inextricably connected, so that each is needed to explain the others. This is especially true of the modern world,